the part, and we'll talk about this later, that initiates the criminal conduct. And the actus reus is the actual conduct in and of itself. So when we talk about actus reus, what we're going to talk about today is, I'm going to try to speed through this because I don't want to lose your attention. So this is actually a really fun area of the law. Once you get these basic understandings down, it's really not that difficult. And what we're going to talk about is actus reus in the sense of a voluntary act, in the sense of a criminal act. We're going to talk a little bit about actus reus in the Constitution. We're going to talk about omissions as criminal acts and possession as criminal acts. Make sure you read the book. The book is very good. It explains some things really well, and that's going to aid in the discussion on the website, on the MyCourses website. If you have any questions when you read the book, pose them on the discussion board or email me. But preferably the discussion board, because that'll let other people know what the answer is, and maybe someone else understands it and can give the answer before I do. When we're talking about actus reus, I keep forgetting the S here. When we're talking about actus reus, remember, we're only punishing people in criminal law for things they actually did. And it would be horrible if we punished people for their status rather than for what they did. And by status, I mean both prior things that they did and also who they are. Imagine, for instance, that you're born with red hair. The legislature, in their infinite wisdom, decided that red-haired people are evil, that they commit more crimes, that they make people nervous, etc., etc. Something completely foolish. Well, if the legislature were to pass a law that said if you had red hair, you are in violation of the anti-red hair criminal statute, and you're to be imprisoned for life. Aside from the cruel and unusual punishment argument in that, red hair is who the person is. It has nothing to do with what they have done. They can't help the fact that they were born with red hair. The same thing happens to somewhat of a lesser extent, but still by far under the status area here. Crimes can't be committed because of things you did previously. And we talked a little bit about ex post facto laws and why we don't criminalize people for behavior that they previously committed. Versus things that people actually do. That's where we focus on when we think of crimes. Things that are done by a person. The actus reus is the physical element of a crime. It's the physical element of the crime. It's the part where something actually gets done. We'll talk about a slight, when we talk about omission, I mentioned omission and possession. We'll talk about some funny little behaviors in that, but for the most part, we're talking about the physical element of the crime. The number one thing I want you to remember with actus reus have them synonymous in your head, and it'll apply to most cases. And that is volitional behavior, voluntary action. Actus reus requires voluntary action, not involuntary action. So let me think of an example. Let me tell you an example that I want you to remember as a clear distinction between voluntary actions and involuntary actions. You are in the doctor's office. You're sitting on that bed or whatever they have that has the paper on it. You're sitting on it. You have a nurse on one side and a doctor on the other side. The doctor touches you on your elbow and causes it to reflex. That reflex throws something that's in your hand and kills the nurse. Or the doctor hits your leg, and by doing that, your leg comes up and somehow kills the nurse or beats her up badly through that action. That's involuntary. That is not your decision to make a movement on. You do not have control over that involuntary action. Some that move further afield from that, imagine for instance, you're sleepwalking and you kill someone in your sleep. You're not in control of your actions. To a lesser extent, you get some defenses with intoxication where you've gotten to the point where you can no longer voluntarily act under your own control. Those are some far field exceptions, but in general I want you to equate actus reus with voluntary action, voluntary criminal action. When we talk about actus reus, we're talking about attitudes that turn into deeds. Attitudes that turn into deeds. Or another way of saying that is manifest criminality. Manifest criminality. Criminal behavior manifest. The purpose behind actus reus, the reason we have actus reus, I dare to say it's kind of obvious, but let's go through some of these reasons. Actus reus ensures or helps to ensure that intent existed. It's one part of the puzzle, circumstantial, but it's one part of the puzzle. If someone stabs someone else, well, there's a good chance there was a reason behind it. The prosecution will try to show that that jab was voluntary, that there was some motive and intent behind the actual jab, while the defense will do the opposite. But it's going to be a little bit harder for the defense because the defense knows that the act occurred by that person and actus reus existed, or is likely to have existed. We also want to reserve harsh punishment for obvious damage. And you can kind of kind of think about it with crimes